of the front to another and stop our advance at the key front areas in Donbass, first of all. And the advancement in these areas is our ultimate goal. Did they succeed? Nope, they didn't manage to succeed. Our armed forces stabilized the situation and started forcing the enemy out. And the second, which is most important, no actions to contain our advance took place. More than that, relocating their large and well-trained reserves, the enemy got weaker at the key fibers, and our troops accelerated our offensive, and we gained a lot of territory. The East grouping has acquired an area of 5 by 7, and the center grouping is very proactive in Donetsk area, and they seized the square kilometers of territory like 4 by 5, 3 by 5 kilometers, etc. And then another thing which is important, there are heavy losses for the enemy, both in manpower and material. I won't be throwing any figures to you. The information is available in the Ministry of Defense, and the figures of the losses are confirmed by a number of these sources. And as a result, it could result in the collapse of the front line in some areas, and the combat capacity of the Ukrainian armed forces could be lost. That's what our ultimate goal is. That's the general estimate of what is happening, and of course the General Staff and the Minister of Defense report the situation to me several times a day. You have mentioned already that people are the most important thing, and that they are being protected. While in the Vladivostok, you have mentioned, you have also asked about the strikes against NPPs in Kursk and Zaporozhye. These are very hazardous and dangerous acts of terror. You can just imagine what will happen if our retaliation is just the same. You have visited the base of flotilla, and you had a discussion of the sea commanding officer of 155th Brigade of the Marines, and you had the discussion with the CEO, and one of the issues discussed was providing residential quarters to the personnel. And it's a contradiction, isn't it? And not quite. And the brigade commander of 155 did not have been talking about householding the things, but actually it was me who has been looking for the place to build residential quarters, and I'm sure that it is necessary to implement the construction plans in time, and they will be fulfilled. And of course, the other commanding officers have raised different issues about the well-being of the soldiers, and I have been talking with the CEO of 118th Brigade and of the Pacific Fleet, and of course there are some requirements for the residential quarters for the personnel of the boys who are fighting over there, and they are doing their duty in a heroic manner. And by the way, one of the tasks of the enemy when they made an incursion into the Russian territory was to stir up panic, but what did it result in? It resulted in the consolidation of the society. That's what always is happening in Russia. It is signified by the fact that the number of the men who are signing contracts with the armed forces has grown. Another thing, as far as social welfare of the servicemen is concerned, the country should take care of it. And the CEO of the 110th Brigade of the Black Sea Fleet stated that the authorities over there are prepared to allocate land, and if the land plots of the belonging owned by the Ministry of Defense are not enough. So I had a discussion, the necessary resources will be allocated. You have mentioned that Kiev might start negotiations with Russia if there is a failure of their offensive in Kursk region. I have mentioned it already that we have already coordinated all the parameters of peaceful cooperation with the representative of Kiev. That was reached. We have come to terms about everything. More than that, the head of the delegation of the Ukraine, and who is still the head of the ruling fraction of the party in the Ukrainian parliament, has endorsed those agreements. It was necessary to iron up some subtleties, but still he has his endorsement. And then Mr. Boris Johnson of the UK came and he instructed the Ukraine to fight till the death of the very last Ukrainian. That's what's happening now, trying to achieve strategic loss of Russia, but that's not happening, and that the authorities of the Ukraine have stated that had they been implementing what was agreed on, the war could have happened a long time ago, had they not been listening to the instructions from the third parties. We have never refused to talk with them, but not on some wishful thinking ideas, but based on the documents that have been already agreed on and endorsed between the two parties. And is there any understanding of what country could be a mediator if the further negotiations occur? We respect our friends and partners who, I think, are sincerely interested in addressing all the issues and resolve all the issues associated with this conflict. First of all, it is Chinese People's Republic, Brazil, India. I'm in contact with my partners, and I have no doubt that the leaders of these countries, and we have the relations of trust and confidence with one another, will be really interested and provide a helping hand. And the whole trouble started with the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014. They keep telling us about the human rights and about the principles of the rules of law, but what was the coup d'etat then? It was a bloody coup d'etat which resulted in a part of the population of the Ukraine not agreeing with what had happened. They started fighting for their right, and it resulted in the ongoing conflict. But the other parties try not to recollect, to think about it and to remember it, but we are aware about it, and we will be protecting the interests of the people who are close to us and who are Russian speakers and who are the bearers of the Russian culture that Mr. Anwar Ibrahim has been talking at length about today. So we understand that the negotiations are possible not with Kiev, but with its foreign mentors. Do you think if the negotiations are over there, do you think it will be possible to believe the agreements? And because repeatedly Russia has been deceived, because it refers to the advancement of NATO to the east. Is there understanding how to deal with them now? We understand who we are dealing with, and these are the parties and the people who disregard the opinion of the others and then do not stand on their word, and they violate the signed agreements, the legally binding documents, but we should look for such guarantees and assurances that could be working. But the most important guarantee and assurance of security is the growth of Russia's economy and military potential of the Russian Federation, and reliable and stable relations with our partners and allies. Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, we have discussed it now with President Putin that Russia has been trying to find a peaceful solution. And why do you think the negotiations in Istanbul were a failure and the negotiations failed?
I mentioned to President Putin last night that I happened to be on a visit to Istanbul, and the President Erdogan asked me to extend for a day because he was busy monitoring the development of the progress of the negotiations. And naturally I knew, and I thought at that time that the issue will be over, because apparently both parties have agreed the principles and the parameters. So I think I am of course of the view that you must secure peace, and it will help immensely not only with these two countries but the entire world, because it is disrupting the global chain supplies and etc. But you must start from somewhere, and as I understand, the parameters laid down in Istanbul was probably the basis for that understanding, and should work from there. And I think both sides have agreed, and I think President Putin is right. We support the initiative, but we must begin somewhere with the parameters that is fair and just. And one cannot renege on a commitment on these issues. And I think most countries should then implore that some basis, particularly that was agreed upon, must be honored, so that we can secure peace as soon as possible.
Александр, извините. Да, вы сказали о том, что нам не удалось.
You have mentioned that we have not agreed with the help of President Erdogan, but we did manage to come to terms, to agree, and the document has been endorsed by the Ukraine. It means that on the whole, these agreements and the terms and conditions of the contract satisfy the Ukraine, and the only reason it was not implemented because they have been instructed and lectured not to live by the contract, and the ambition of the West was to reach a strategic loss, strategic defeat for Russia, to break it into pieces, and they believe that here is the manna from the heaven, and they will manage to achieve the strategic goals that they've been striving to achieve for centuries. Boris Johnson came and he said, no, keep fighting, and that's why they're still fighting. I was under the impression that those that are the leaders of the Ukraine are aliens or foreigners for their own countries. They do not think about the destiny of their own country, because such heavy losses, I don't know what they will be doing in the future. It is necessary now for them to bring down the age bracket to drafting people and doing what they did in Nazi Germany, Hitler Jugend, but that will not help. Next step will be to draft students, and it will bleed the country. And I'm just under the impression that it's not their peoples, but the relatives of the leading elite live abroad. They hop abroad, and that's it. So they're just covered, and they proclaim the nationalistic slogans and fooling their populations. But once again, I would like to state that if there is a desire of the Ukraine to carry on with the negotiations, I can do that, but based on the agreements that were achieved in Istanbul. And another subject matter, there is such a notion as Malaysian economic miracle, thanks to the economic zones that you have set up. What are the conditions for business, and are Russian companies welcome there?
Well, I met a number of leading Russian companies yesterday and even this morning. We, as a policy, do not regard, as Vice President of China mentioned, we do not accept unilateral sanctions, but we are, of course, trying to resolve that so that we are not seen to be confronting any power or economic power in particular. So we focus on economic zones in the country, and Russian companies, I've told them, we are an independent country, the centrality. We want to be engaging with Russia more effectively, and I was extremely delighted that many of them are coming. When I asked them, when are you coming? They said, we're planning. Some are saying, we will go next week, and a group will come in October. So there is interesting progress in interest, because of course we are fortunate because of the situation and our relations, more so with China these days, that we have, for example, growth registered in the last quarter 5.9%, with inflation at 2%, with huge investments, also from the United States, particularly in the digital and energy sector, and Germany in particular. So I think we will do whatever is necessary. We can learn from the comprehensive plan package that President Putin mentioned, and there is enormous potential. I mean, the Russians should not in any way feel that we are influenced by others or prejudiced against others. There is this potential and this special relationship that Malaysia wants to offer to Russia as a friend of ours.
Спасибо. Владимир Владимирович, если говорить...
Thank you. President Putin, when we talk about the special regime, it is the free port of Vladivostok and advanced development zones. How competitive do you think with the other preferential regime in the APEC countries? Are you satisfied with what is happening in the Russia Far East? We are happy to create a competitive environment and conditions over here. I will not go through the list, and many sitting in this conference hall are aware of what these measures are. It is the advanced development programs and free zones, free port of Vladivostok. There are many incentives provided to the business. When I start talking it at the governmental meetings, the prime minister is just getting nervous because he believes that we would like to give even more preferences. He said, that's enough, there are so many. The deputy premier of Chinese People's Republic just referred to the economic forum in Harbin, and he was over there. He was sent to Harbin by Mr. Xi Jinping, our great friend, and I am thanking to the deputy premier for the work that took place over there. It was very interesting. And something that I would like to say, I think it was unexpected for both our guests and our audience. Will you spill the beans? Yes. It will be also unexpected for our premier and for Mr. Herman of Sberbank as well. No, they are okay. They will be able to stomach it. But that's what I would like to say. I have been talking with the representative of our diplomatic office in Harbin, and I asked him what is necessary to do for Chinese investors to come to the Far East. And he said the Chinese authorities do not restrain their investors. Anyone or any who can go over there can invest. But the conditions that are created in Harbin are more favorable than we have in the Far East. That's what it is.
So the Chinese authorities have been working on special economic zones. They have been putting in place conditions for economic development, so we have to have a closer look at the benefits and preferences that the Chinese authorities are setting up in their territories, including in the border regions, so as to attract businesses from other countries, in particular from the friendly nation of China, to make them come and invest. We have to analyze all of that, and maybe we could complement some of these tools and instruments with some novelties, with innovative solutions to make sure that there is an interest on the part of investors and business circles. Yes, we are creating a favorable environment, but there's still some work to be done. That's what I wanted to say. Vice President Han Zheng, I would like to ask you, what are you doing to make sure that the Chinese businesses stay in China instead of coming to Russia? How do you... why are you asking such provocative questions? Well, because it's a provocative question. Yes, we've got to attract them to Russia to come here. From the outset, I would like to say that the Chinese government has always been supporting Chinese investment abroad, and in particular to Russia and to the Russian Far East. President Putin has mentioned China's cooperation with the Russian Far East. President Putin has broached this subject, and we discussed this subject when we were in Harbin. And we've got to have a look at this question at both sides. On the one hand, China and the Russian Far East are engaged in very close, high-level cooperation. We've got a very solid foundation for such cooperation. And we've got some tangible outcomes of this cooperation. As far as I'm aware, over the first 7 months of this year, in cooperation between the Russian Far East and the north east of China, the trade has exceeded $60 billion. And that accounts for about 40% of the total trade between our two countries. So the trend is very positive, very dynamic. On the other hand, we have to look into the future. First of all, we've got to preserve this positive trend. In the trade between the two countries, the foundation for cooperation is very solid. The Russian Far East has a huge potential in terms of logistics, transportation, energy, agriculture, and mining. So we've got a very wide gamut of avenues of cooperation to be pursued, and we've got to preserve this trend, but this is not enough yet. We've got to look into the future, and we've got to expand our cooperation to other industries. I refer in particular to green development, digital economy, and probably maritime industries. And of course, culture needs to be covered as well as art. There's a very big potential in these fields. Let me share with you one experience of mine, an adventure, as it were. At President Putin's invitation today, this morning, I visited two branches of Russian universities here. One of them is the Conservatoire branch in Primorsky Krai. And you know, this trip has left an indelible impression. I've looked at these facilities, I've looked at the buildings, I saw students and school children, from the third year of the university. They were performing admirably, playing some classical music, dancing, and the ballet, the Swan Lake, namely, and I was deeply impressed. And I said, yes, we've got a very good level of cooperation between our two countries in these fields. And I'm happy to see that each year there is a very big flow of Chinese students coming to Russia to study arts. As far as I know, from Heilongjiang province, 40 students have arrived as of now to Russia. So there is a very big mutual interest between these two regions in deepening their ties and cooperation, and the Chinese government has always been supportive of all businesses and companies, be that public-owned or private ones, supporting their investment into Russia's economy and the economy of the Russian Far East in particular. So we've got very wide cooperation opportunities. Thank you. Prime Minister Ibrahim, two secrets have been revealed. We've got to learn the third secret from you. Is Malaysian business interested in coming to the advanced development territories and the free port of Vladivostok to work in a full-fledged manner here?
The region, Vladivostok, was something new to us. This is my first visit, and a number of discussions have taken place. But Russia as a whole, of course, has been given enough attention. There's been growing trade and investments jointly in, of course, energy sector, industrial complex, and also in digital technology. We're sending more students to Russia. And of course, this can be explored specifically. We're not as powerful as China. We're trying to be. It will take time. Thank you.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, it's very nice to hear some reaction. When there's a round of applause, then it means that we are moving in the right direction. If we look at the statistics from the Ministry for the Development of the Russian Far East, over the last 10 years, we have had 4,200 billion rubles that has been invested over these years into Russia. Is it much or not so much? And what about the rate of investment? Is it going to grow or be preserved? Because, Mr. Trutnev has asked you to raise the goal, the benchmark, to 12 trillion by 2030. I think it's a big sum, but not enough yet, not sufficient. Mr. Trutnev has made his traditional report on what has been achieved. Over the previous year, we, as is tradition, have also participated in the launch of new companies, new facilities, and there is a view according to which this investment can be boosted to at least 12 trillion rubles. So by another 1.5 trillion, and I think this is a realistic goal. Thank you. Mr. President, let's get back to the recent developments. At the end of August, Pavel Durov, CEO of Telegram, was detained in Paris. He was later left under judicial surveillance, and he had to post bail. So why did Moscow not do what Paris has done? And, there's been a lot of talk that you had a meeting in Baku. Is that true or not? I met Mr. Durov once in Moscow. That was a long time ago, many years ago. He spoke to me about his plans. I've got regular meetings with business circles, and he attended one of the meetings that took place in the Kremlin in Moscow. I do not remember when exactly. It was many years ago. He spoke about his plans for his future businesses, and since that time we've not had any contacts. So why meet in Baku? I do not know why I would have done that. Moreover, I was not aware that he was in Baku. Well, if there is an interest, there are many business people here. I often attend and organize meetings with businesses. We meet as part of association of entrepreneurs, or I meet with businesses individually, especially if businesses need some guarantees or assurances from the government. Both myself and the chairman of the government and the federal ministers are always willing to do that. This is what I've always had in mind. We do not try to erect any war between ourselves and the business. So if he wanted to meet us, then he could have done it. But I didn't know that, and I thought he lived in Moscow. No, he doesn't live in Moscow. He lives in Dubai. Well, people of the world, billionaires, they can afford to live wherever they please. We do not have any grievances with him. But I know that there are many grievances on the part of many countries, given the fact that this platform is, to a certain extent, used by different people, different organizations that, whose activities could prove to be deleterious, either to the economy or to the security of any particular country. And I think the government of Russia could have some questions to address to him, but, you know, this is the problem with any platform of this type. If they're treating Durov like that, maybe they should detain others as well, put them on under house arrest. So the actions of the authorities, this is something I do not understand, because I mean the authorities of France, because they are very selective. Okay, thank you. Prime Minister Ibrahim, last year your country registered a record number of Russian tourists, 110,000 people. It's a growth of 37% year on year, and this is not the limit yet. To boost these numbers, do you have plans for direct flights?
We should not preclude Aeroflot going to Malaysia. Firstly, we have been seen and more attractive to Russian tourists. You know, there's a huge increase in a year, and I think the issue of flight is one consideration. We say to have agreed in principle. We are working on it as fast as possible, and then of course to introduce Malaysia to Russian public, and I think they would, once they get to know the country, is peaceful, is economically vibrant, and a very beautiful country. I mean, I don't want to compete with Russia or China, but at least what we have in Malaysia, you don't have in Russia. But what you have in Russia, we don't have in Malaysia. So it is important for both countries to increase the passage of tourists, because they will see things that they have not seen in their countries. And I really hope that there is that potential for Russians to come, and we do encourage. I mean, Malaysia is a friendly nation, no prejudice. We are not dictated by any power, and we want to have that sort of special relations with Russia as we have with many countries. I think once you go there, you will find out that Malaysia is truly Asia.
Господин Ибрагим, ну что посмотреть в России? Я думаю.
Prime Minister Ibrahim, and what about Russia? The Russian tourists coming to Malaysia. What should they see in Malaysia? What is the essence of Asia?
The multiracial society, we have a strong ethnic, indigenous, and also Malay population. We have a large number of Chinese ethnic minorities and Indians and indigenous tribes. We have a range of what you call virgin jungles. You have beautiful beaches and it's equatorial climate. We don't have winters, so you can have your swim throughout the year. And that's, of course, to my mind, an advantage. I always have difficulty when travel, because you always ask the question, is it going to be winter, is it going to be summer, is it hot, it is winter, so you have to change dress. In Malaysia, you can come comfortably, as long as you wear something, and you are fine.
В зале стало, кстати, больше улыбающихся лиц на этой фразе, что всегда в Малайзии.
Well, everyone is smiling when you said that it's warm and nice in Malaysia. Well, I've been to Malaysia and I can confirm everything Prime Minister has just said. Mr. President, we've spoken about tourism. You are traveling a lot across Russia. We are developing domestic tourism as well. In 2023, 83.5 million Russians traveled across Russia. That's a 23% increase, and many are coming to the Russian Far East, more than 6 million last year. What kind of economic benefit does it bring to Russia, this increase in the tourism exchanges? And many countries across the world, tourism is one of the dynamic industries. Well, we shouldn't go far. Yeah, you know that around 5 million people from Russia go to Turkey, and this is an important source of income for the budget of the country. Tourism is becoming an increasingly efficient industry across many economies of the world, and this should also be the case in Russia, given the vast tourism potential we have, and that's why the government has adopted a whole program dedicated to developing internal tourism. A lot has been said on the subject. I'm not going to add anything new, but to these ends, we need to develop the infrastructure, we need to care for the environment to make sure that the development of tourism does not have a harmful effect on the environment. We've got many projects like the 5 Seas and Lake Baikal. Many are aware of about that and have heard about it. There are special preferences to those who build small hotels, especially if these are not permanent buildings, and all of that is delivering results. There is a wonderful region of Russia, the Russian Far East, and its tourism potential is infinite, and it's going to attract an increasing number of tourists, and it's great that Russian citizens are turning their gazes increasingly towards internal tourism opportunities, because it means staying within your area of culture, of your language. You don't have to run into problems when crossing the border, the customs, and you can communicate with our history, with our tradition, with our nature. And this is something fascinating, that's magnificent, but we still have a lot to do to bolster this process. And as for the benefits for the people, well, if you live in a territory which is visited by tourists, then your level of standard of living is growing, because it means more money coming into the regional budget and to the budgets of all levels, and also brings money to the citizens who live in this region. The more attractive a region, the more investment it attracts from the private investors. So this is a win-win situation, and it's kind of a virtuous circle. But these are the prospects. But if we look at the statistics, we'll see that the economy is doing well. The unemployment is 2.4%, which is a record low. But if we study the statistics, we see that some key industries are lacking human personnel, because 47% industrial enterprises were suffering from shortages of labor. These are some of the latest statistics. Does it mean that the economy is doing too well, or maybe we simply lack manpower? Well, the economy is doing well, but there is a lot to do. You know, we remember Faustus by Goethe. Oh, please stop, wonderful moment in time. We never should stop. We have to reach for the horizon. Nothing can ever be, all can never be good all the time. But of course, the economy is developing steadily on the whole. Last year, we were rejoicing because our GDP grew by 3.4%, if my memory serves me right. whereas in the first 6 months this year, and this is something we discussed yesterday, I said the GDP grows by 4%. Mr. Oreshkin has corrected me. It's 4.6% in the first 6 months this year. This is a very good indicator for our economy. Well, I think it's going to be adjusted by the end of the year, but we can expect that at least it's going to be no less than last year, but probably the GDP growth is going to be even superior to the growth last year, and that is the most important indicator for the state of economy. In Malaysia, inflation stands at 2%. Unfortunately, in Russia, it stands at a higher. Our target for inflation is 4%, but right now it's around 9.2%. But right now there is a downward trend. Right now inflation stands at 8.9% and is decreasing, which is a good thing. As far as lack of manpower is concerned, so Mr. Solzhenitsyn, whom Prime Minister has mentioned, he used to say that the most important task for the government is to preserve its citizens, its population. We have to care for families with children. We have to preserve the population. But the labor market is indeed in a unique position. Around 2.5% is the unemployment rate, which is a historic low. This is due to the demands of real manufacturing sector. How do we address this issue? Well, of course, we need to care for the population. We've got to increase the birth rate. We've got to create the favorable environment to make it fashionable to have as many children as possible. You know, in the past, families used to have 8, 9 children per family, but this is just one avenue to pursue. The other one is to increase the labor productivity to make sure we can do more with fewer people. Well, as far as how to go about that, well, Vice President Han Zheng has mentioned several instruments and tools. We need to introduce artificial intelligence. We have to introduce new management methods for production, automate. You know, I remembered Japan, which we overtook, becoming the 4th economy of the world in terms of purchasing parity. But I think there are 10 times more robots working there than in Russia. There's much for us to do.
We should also dedicate us to genetics, biology, agriculture. We have a lot to do in all these fields. And personnel as well. We should train personnel. This is one of the most important tasks of our government. That is why there are the new national projects that is called personnel. Well, let's continue with economic issues. Mr. President, we met a week ago at another session of Central Bank. The rate is going to be 18%, and it is already said that this time 18% will be preserved. As for the loans, and the growth is the same, and the growth is 2.2%. This is according to the central bank data. How can you explain the situation? How can you explain that the rate is very high and the rate loans are different? Well, this depends on 2 moments. First of all, that the loans, the consumer loans, this at a very high level, because people do not really feel the key rate. And as for loans for organizations, there are certain planes that have already been designed, and despite the increase of the key rate, they keep getting loans. And the second thing is that we have already made a decision according to which we support separate sectors of our economy. There are state instruments related to subsidizing some kind of rates for certain sectors and projects. This is the explanation. The governor of the central bank, Ms. Nabiullina, said that the scale of overheating of the economy was the greatest in the last 16 years. Are there any risks for stability, and how are we going to freeze the situation, to cool the situation? Well, we're going to increase the key rate, cancel subsidized loan, mortgage. There are also preferences for IT mortgages in the Russian Far East, in the Arctic, family mortgages. These are the ways that we're going to follow to cool the situation. There is another factor. Stable work of the government, of the finance ministry, in order to balance the budget. I speak about investment. We've already spoken about the figures in the Russian Far East, but in 2023, according the statistic was the growth of investment was 9.8 growth. After the growth in 2022, that trend continues. This trend will continue in investment, and what can also be increased. The preservation of the same pace of investment will be difficult, knowing the circumstances that we have been speaking, but we need to strive to do it. There are unique and special instruments of support that I have mentioned. But I'll repeat, preserving the same pace of investment will be difficult. The government has to think where and in which fields the business will be supported, so that there would not be any risks for collapse in the economy. Another topic that does not concern the economy of the Russian Far East, I would like to ask you about the elections in the U.S. Maybe you have a favorite candidate there. And in November, when we know the results of this race, are you going to call the new president to congratulate the new president? Well, it's been long since I've called any leaders of Europe or the US, but we're not against any type of contacts. We're not limiting them. Yes, sometimes we exchange some kind of information using different channels. First of all, through the foreign ministry. It's not for us to determine. These are elections of the US people. I said that if we can name a favorite candidate, it used to be Joe Biden, but now he is not participating in the election campaign, and he recommended all his allies to support Ms. Harris. So that is what we are going to do. So it was, well, he said that we should, that is why we should also do that. Well, her laugh, she's laughing, her laugh is so fascinating. It means that everything is good, and if everything is good, it means that, for instance, if we're speaking about Joe Biden, there are so many sanctions against Russia introduced, and if everything is good with Ms. Harris, maybe she'll refrain herself from such measures, or maybe she'll change them. So in the end, it will be the choice of the US people, and we will respect this choice. Speaking about the US, in August, there was the exchange of prisoners between US and Russia. What countries were the mediators contributed to that? So it means that we can have dialogue with the West. And one more addition, in an interview to TASS, our ambassador in the US, Mr. Antonov, said that there are 60 Russians in US prisons. Well, we care about all the Russians that need our help and that they are abroad, and we will continue to do that. As for the exchanges that we already had, many countries participated in this work, in this mission. As for the journalist the U.S. journalist that worked as journalist, but in fact he was gathering intelligence data. Saudi prince participated in this work to exchange prisoners, and thanks to that we managed to return our citizens to our country. As well, the president of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, provided a platform to do that, as well as other countries also participated in this work. Some other countries showed goodwill, and in the end, I think that we managed to reach a positive result in the interests of everyone who participated in it. And first of all, our citizens returned to their fatherland. The most important thing that those who were doing some very important things for our country. And I ask everyone here to have a round of applause. Let's return to the topic of our session, Mr. Prime Minister. You already had a meeting with Mr. President. There are prospects, and we need to develop our cooperation. We have agreement about free trade between EAEU with Iran, Iraq, and Serbia. And the same agreement will be signed with Mongolia. There are also negotiations with Indonesia and some other countries. Are there any such ideas in Malaysia?
Free trade, and there's no restrictions, and I've assured President Putin last night that whatever avenues are being introduced will continue. I mean, we still have good relations with Iran and most of these countries. And if the parameters are right, encouraging free trade, we will pursue. There's no issue at all to my mind. Even now, without the special arrangement, you can see this new wave of interest from both sides in Malaysia and Russia. Now, with the agreement, it would, of course, further facilitate and assist the business community. In fact, we're inviting delegations representing banks, aerospace and industry, and some others to come. And we will. What is important is that my assurance that you will see a faster change, a more positive change in terms of the trade and also exchanges between Malaysia and Russia, and we are determined to record that as soon as possible.
Спасибо.
Thank you. Mr. President, you spoke about the way to solve the problem of the deficit of energy in the Far East that is going to be forecasted. What can you say about electricity generation? Well, it depends on the region. In Siberia, for instance, there is excessive electricity generation, and in the Russian forest there is scarcity of energy. So we need to take timely measures. For instance, repair facilities, modernize deeply certain facilities. So we have plans that are being designed. Some of them are already approved. We need to do it on a timely basis and need to establish an economically based plan in this sphere. Concerning energy, there is another question about foreign markets. At the end of the year, the agreement about transit of Russian energy through Ukraine ends, and Ukraine said that it's not going to prolong the contract. What the energy prospects of Europe? Do we need to hear the voices of those who are going to suffer from it? Well, there is the head of Gazprom, just here in the front row. And also I'm going to speak to German Oskovich. They're all here.